Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners. This is your host, Andy Curry. Welcome to today's program. I am excited today. I have a really interesting guest for you to hear. I have on the line with me Rebecca Cooper, and she has been speaking professionally since 2003. The content she speaks on is eating disorders, emotional eating, yo-yo dieting, and Rebecca speaks she speaks in the U.S. and internationally. She is based out of California. She has written a book called Diets Don't Work. So, Rebecca, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Andy. I'm glad to be here.
We're very happy to have you here. Would you tell us about your speaking business? So what we'd like to know is, who are you speaking to, the types of groups that you speak to, and how are you helping them?
Okay. Now, the groups that I speak to may be a little different than what most speakers are speaking to, because most of my audience are mental health professionals. I started some years ago with teaching people how to treat eating disorders. And from that, I've been asked to speak all over the world now to just help other therapists learn how to treat their patients. So my whole venue is a little bit different maybe than, what you normally would think. I also speak at, churches and community events and, local things here, conferences in the United States. So I try to spread the message. That's my biggest mission, is to bring awareness about eating disorders and disordered eating, and also to teach the professionals on how to actually treat this very complex disorder.
Okay. How did you come to know this information? What did you go to schooling for it? How did it happen?
Very good question. Okay. When I was 13 years old, I myself started out with an eating disorder. And after years of recovery, about 20 years, I went back to school and I got my master's in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University. Now, while I was there, a very interesting thing happened, because my sole purpose in going back to school was to find ways to help people who had problems with disordered eating and eating disorders. And I had a professor, Dr. Abrams, who was just a wonderful professor. And I confided to her about what I was wanting to do. And she told me, she goes, Rebecca, there really isn't a good method out there to treat eating disorders. And maybe it's up to you to create something. Now, you know how sometimes somebody will say something to you and it'll just hit you in the pit of your stomach, like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Sure.
And that's what happened to me. I knew right then and there that's what I needed to do.
Wow.
And so I got busy with, creating a program. And with that, I ended up getting more and more patients. I was seeing people at that time for problems with yo-yo dieting, emotional overeating. But I started getting more and more patients who had eating disorders. And it got to where, after a while, I had to create an outpatient program. And then from the outpatient program, I found that they really needed a house where they felt safe and secure, and especially that they were the kind of foods around that would promote healthy eating. And so actually purchased a home where the girls, at that time it was just girls, could live while they were attending the outpatient program. And that's how people from all over the world started coming to Rebecca's house. And that just, it grew now to where we have all levels of care for eating disorders for those who are medically stable. But it started out as a transitional living house. And the reason it started out that way was, one of the things I saw was that they were people who were going to excellent treatment centers all over the country. And as soon as they got out of treatment, they relapsed. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you can't go from this little cocoon where everything's taken care of you out into the real world. So the transitional living, I created the first transitional living house for eating disorders. And it was just to take people from that in-between step and launch them out into the real world.
How successful have you been with that?
Very successful. Very successful. Like I said, we started out just a transitional living. Today we have a very large clinic and 3 different houses that are supporting different levels of care for our patients. And our patients are getting better. I mean, some of them have been through so many different treatment centers, and they just have not received the proper information. A lot of times they've been to alcohol and drug treatment centers, which, that's very good for people who have alcohol and drug problems. And a lot of times they overlap, the eating disorders and the drug and alcohol, but it's treated in a different manner. You really have to know what you're doing with treating eating disorder patients. It is not just a cookie cutter type approach.
No. As I intimated to you before we started talking, I had someone pretty close to me that had and still has an eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And she was in there for, I want to say 6, maybe 8 weeks, and the insurance said, okay, that's enough. And booted her out, and she lasted maybe 30 to 60 days doing well, and just went downhill fast. And so that's pretty common, I take it, because she was anorexic.
Yes.
That's pretty common?
Yes, very common. It's very common. Unless, I believe that unless there's that transitional piece or where people are actually able to start practicing real life behaviors and being exposed to the stresses of real life, they're not going to be able to handle that when it comes without using their eating disorder. And that's what a lot of times eating disorder, not just the behaviors, but the thoughts are used as a way of coping with stress or just trying to check out or not have to experience the feelings that may be coming up that they have not ever dealt with. And they'll use the thoughts or the behaviors of the eating disorder to push those down.
On the anorexia, I remember, because we went to a family counseling thing while she was there. And when I got there, I was shocked. And I know you wouldn't be, but I was at the time. There was all girls. And they were all just as beautiful as they could be, but they had this problem. And a lot of them seemed to have voices telling them in their head what a fat pig they were, they didn't deserve to eat and all that. Is that kind of a common thing? Or?
Absolutely. The negative self-talk, I think, is one of the biggest symptoms behind disordered eating. And it happens not just with eating disorders, but people who are doing yo-yo dieting or binge eating. Their self-talk, they would never talk or treat someone else the way they're talking and treating themselves. And when you have that relationship with yourself, I mean, if you have an abusive relationship, you want to get out of it. But what if that abuse is coming from yourself?
Right.
So that's one of the underlying causes and underlying issues that really needs to be addressed.
How does that happen? Do you know?
Yes. Well, I don't have all the answers, but I do have some. I think part of it has to do with people being so externally focused where they lose themselves. So it's almost like you put on a mask and you say what you think the other person wants you to say, and you look the way the other person wants you to look, and you do everything from an external point of view, to where after a while you don't know your own opinions, you don't know yourself, you don't know what you're feeling, and you certainly don't know your appetite. So it's that division. And in fact, I call one of the processes in my recovery steps a journey back to self. Because in order to recover from an eating disorder long term, it has to be done from an internal point of view. It can't be from somebody outside of you telling you what to do, when to eat, how to eat. Very much like what a diet does. So it's very important that a person is able to start reconnecting with themselves and their appetite, so they know that when they're hungry and when they're full, and they can make healthy food choices, and they treat and talk to themselves like they would with anybody else that they just loved and adored. And so that is one of the underlying themes that we really need to help our patients with.
Interesting. Now, I have a friend who he's about 5'8", 53 years old. I'll bet he weighs 350, 380. Yeah. Very intelligent man. He's a computer genius.
Yes.
And he's just struggled with that weight, and he knows what to do.
Oh yeah.
But he doesn't do it. Now, is that an emotional eating kind of a thing? Would you say?
I would. Yeah, that is most people, and it's so funny because I had the hardest time actually hiring registered dietitians. With Rebecca's house, we have medical doctors and psychiatrists and therapists and registered dietitians. But I had the hardest time with the registered dietitians because the patients are so well versed in nutrition. They know the fat grams, they know the calories, they know what they should be eating. It's not about knowing the information, it's about being able to do it. And again, that comes from internally knowing how to do it. One of the reasons why I wrote the book, Diets Don't Work, is that 35% of people who go on a diet end up with disordered eating. So that is one of the first things that kind of separates us from our appetite. So instead of eating when we're hungry, we're eating when the diet says. If we're really, really hungry, we think, oh, I am doing so good because I'm hungry and I'm not eating. That's a totally disregard from your appetite.
He was doing the what do you call that? The Atkins thing.
Yes.
And I thought that was so dangerous. Isn't it dangerous?
Yes. Anything that it just focuses on, one type of food is not appropriate. The other thing with the reason why I'm so driven to complete my mission here about helping as many people as I can with disordered eating is my mother actually died from morbid obesity. And so there are a lot of people who are suffering that do not know that there is a way out. They think they need to diet, or they think that they need to have the bariatric surgery or something like this. Well, there can be things that are going on, like I was talking about earlier, that there's issues why they're using the food. And for some people, and especially I find people with binge eating disorder or people who are obese, some people I find have an addictive quality to some types of foods. Now, this isn't everybody, but some people do. It's much like a person who is an alcoholic who has a drink and then continues to drink even though they want to stop. Well, some people have that reaction to some foods. One of the ones I see primarily is sugar addiction. It is more like I have sugar now and then I start binging. And for a lot of people who have this problem, if that is not addressed, it's almost impossible to recover from the disordered eating.
Okay. Well, Rebecca, that field is so vast, and we could talk for hours about that. But thank you so much for sharing with us your knowledge. That is fascinating information. Now, how can people get a hold of you should they want you to speak or want to know more about getting help?
Well, for my speaking engagements, I have a website, RebeccaCooper.com, and that's where you can actually find, some of the other places where I've spoke on TV, different interviews that I've done that are actually on the website. And I also have some resources there. And then as far as the program, I have the dietsdon'twork.org. And that actually, I have a free EPUB that can be very beneficial for people who are wondering if they have a problem with this. And you can actually get that at dietsdon'twork.org/EPUB. Now, if somebody thinks they may have an eating disorder or that someone they love, then go to Rebecca'sHouse.org. And there we give free assessments and we can answer any questions that a person might have about eating disorders. And I can also give you their phone number, which is 800-711-6336.
Okay. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for taking the time to show us what goes on in your life. That's fantastic information, and you are really doing mankind a great service.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much for letting me bring more awareness to this problem on your show.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.